they want to read what kind of transaction has happened on real-time basis, or what kind of growth that particular property has seen. So are you relying completely database on government listing, or you are having your own mechanism to compile this data and provide, or are you collaborating with any Proptech company to provide data analytics?
So Proptech is our shareholder. So we've gone a little more deeper with them on how we can improve our experience with our investors better. So obviously 60-70% we rely on, because they've already solved for something for the longest time. So there's no point reinventing a wheel. And considering they're our shareholders, so our synergies are aligned to what our intent is. But there is 30% of our thing is, I would say, still offline. We haven't been able to crack that from an online standpoint, where we still rely on market intel and multiple other things before we acquire a property. Like I said, we've scientifically created a process in which we will be doing that acquisition. But 70-80% investment decision making helps us from that data. Let's take BKC as an example in Bombay. Is BKC a great investment destination for investors? Absolutely not, right? Because in the last 10 years, your rentals hasn't really scaled up to what it is, which means your capital value has also not scaled up to what it is, right? There are some outlier transactions which have happened here and there, but when you look at an entire market in itself, has it really been that market which investors have invested, made a 20% IRR exit out of the investment? It's not going to do that, right? But it's an aspirational investment for people that if I'm a Mumbaiker, I need to own a BKC asset because it's always a dream for them, right? Yeah. But it's one's port of call, right? Like, is it an aspirational investment or is it an investment to generate wealth? Yeah. So different mindsets of people, and accordingly people take a call and start deploying capital, right? So that's there. But data is very, very critical. Investors have become more careful. He told a very important point: people are ready to pay for it. It just shows that there's a huge consumer behavior. Like even Proptech, CRE, Proptech, everybody charges for the data. They don't give it for free. Their balance sheets give you a thing, how their P&L has grown from 1 crore to 15-20 crores of top line, what these companies are able to do collectively. I'm sure it's more. Shows that they still haven't cracked the market, in my opinion. There's a long way for them to go, but great signs that people understand that if I'm making 1 crore, 5 crore, 10 crore investment, I don't mind paying a lakh. Yeah. When I can pay a lakh or 5 lakh to get a legal opinion, I might as well pay another lakh to just find and peacefully sleep at night. That am I buying at a premium? Am I buying at discount? Am I buying at market price? And accept that decision basis how desperate I am to buy. If I want to buy a premium, or how bargain hunter I am buying at a discount, or just because I want to deploy and buy at a market price. At least people are aware and they can sleep peacefully. Otherwise, imagine you buy and tomorrow I come say, "Oh, I bought this asset at only this much." I think you overpaid there, right? That just shakes up the entire thing for them and demotivates them in generally from a real estate asset class itself. That this asset class means I'll always get cheated, right? So this transparency these companies have solved for is a big decision maker on how real estate will continuously keep growing from an investment market for people.
Agreed. Ashish, talking about speed, earlier we spoke about how speed is, if you're working in the speed and if you're making that mark, it is not a mode, but this is how you have to function.
Sure.
I want to understand when you speak with investors, in 2003 and 5, we saw the launch of, 99 acres, Magic Bricks. That time investors were like, Proptech will take time to take off.
Correct.
Then in 2010 and 12, in between that, we saw housing, common floor, and all of these companies coming in. Yeah. We heard the same dialogue from investors: the Proptech sector will take off soon. Now we are standing in 2023. We are hearing the same dialogues that Proptech sector will take off soon. Right. So what are the main challenges which everyone is facing in Proptech? Yeah. Why we are not able to take off? Like, even if we talk about unicorn, in Proptech sector, we always have a name, no broker, coming into mind. Right. There are a lot of profitable business also happening in procurement fund, like infra market and off business. But what is the major challenge are we facing here? Why we are not able to take off in terms of how investors are putting in?
Yeah, so I mean, you talk about edtech, fintech, then you talk about Proptech. There's a stepchild treatment to it. That's what I feel from whatever I see and read. It's always there at the bottom of everyone's investment. What investments we've done, you'll see Proptech at the bottom, or you will not see it at all, right? Yeah. I don't think there's a scenario globally. I think it's an Indian thing. Yeah. So, and the reason why it's like that in India is because of the word prop. right? The moment you talk about real estate or property, right, there's so much of ambiguity, what he's solving for, what I'm solving for, what he's kind of institutionalized from a commercial investment perspective. There's so much of ambiguity when it comes to real estate that it's a gamble. Like, you put your money here, will it just disappear tomorrow? Is the asset clean? Are the people behind it clean? Because that's another big problem in the industry, right? To get people with the right intent, with the right pedigree to actually build these Proptech companies who are again dependent on, say, developers, say from a revenue stream perspective, right? So there is a lack of transparency. There's a lot of opacity in the real estate sector. Now, all the Proptech companies are trying to solve for that, right? At a very high level, everyone's trying to solve for that. Some of them do it well, but they might be small. Some of them do it not so well, but they might be big because of whatever reasons, right? But then they blow up at some point in time. So I feel that the VCs are looking at Proptech with a slightly risk-averse approach. And I'm not saying that they're not doing it. You have evidence right here, right? So, but I guess it's a few and far in between compared to the larger pie of VC investments. Yeah.
Sanjay, what's your take on this?
If we're talking about VC funding not coming into PropTech, I think that's one section. PropTech not taking off, I think is a different thing. Obviously, I think the best PropTech business, but people just don't recognize, is Airbnb in the world, right?
Yeah.
It's not only what I think is the best marketplace, I think it's the best PropTech company in the world. And I'm not saying that because I'm YC and they're, a Y Combinator as well. I have great respect for Brian and, Airbnb, what they built. If you're coming down to the point of VCs, particularly domestic VCs in India, a lot of the times their viewpoint on property, technology, and real estate is that it's a subset of fintech. And you also have to wonder what the fuck they know, right? Because at the end of the day, I think founders are responsible for building great companies, not investors.
Yeah.
I think investors can be great enablers, and you were talking about moats. I think there are some people, particularly in India, that think they are the moat, that they invest in you, and therefore they can select winners. And you see in market spaces, large market spaces, where all the VCs coalesce around only two players, particularly in India. And you rarely ever see third or fourth guy getting funded in that space. And they have a very nuanced and view about competition and how that looks like. And sometimes they can't tell apart. Like it's a saying that, I tell my team, like we used to say that when we were in the trucking business, they used to compare us to some other business. So how are you different from them? And the thing that we used to say is like at early stage, almost everybody looks the same. And in the same way, when the TV first came out, they called it a radio with, right? Not a TV until it became its own thing. And so my personal experiences of speaking with VCs, particularly in that space, we don't have many Indian VCs on our cap table, is I went to this particular VC and we were explaining what we were doing. Majority of the people that are at a certain position, they don't have holdings in real estate. There's non-residential. So they wouldn't be users to understand this, right? And they're like, one VC I remember is like, Sanjay, this is all great, but I'm having a little bit of a hard time understanding, the market size of this.
Yeah.
So this was right before I was about to leave. So I said, if you don't mind, let's take a walk out here. And before I was about to leave, I showed her out the window and I was telling her, I was like, my name is Landeed. All of this is land, right? Market size, we're the 7th largest country in the world if you were to only look at India. I understand water and space are a larger market than us, but if you believe that it's a hard problem, you shouldn't also be consider your investments in rocket companies or space. Like you have an easier time believing that there's a market out there in space than it is on land, on Earth, right? And number two is there was this other discussion we had is like, is it like we were saying that 10% of the top landowners in India own almost 55+% of marketable land in India? It's a very concentrated thing, something similar that you even see in the crypto space, even though they call it decentralized. And they're like, is that true and all of this? And the simple thing that I was like saying is, look, if you own 100 acres in India, you're considered like 0.01% of landowners. There are farmers in US that own 5,000 acres, 10,000 acres. They use planes. But if you wanted to test it out, I said, look, you can go around your entire VC office, take a note and ask every single person in this office how much land they own. And I will just show you on my app. And I guarantee you 95% probability that I own more land than everybody else combined in here. And so I think there's a lack of understanding about what's going on because they don't face that problem. I think there's also the type of founders that come into this marketplace. Most of them are not probably younger because a lot of us in our 20s and early 30s are not going out there and purchasing land, right? Or understanding how the whole process goes through. You kind of brute force it. You think there's a broker, there's this labeling guy. And so you never really are touching the problem itself until you face it. That's why I often say that, hey, that's why, like I faced it. I had land encroachment. A minister tried to come in and take over our land. And so that's how I got into this business. And that's how I became a touch point. I grew up, somewhere else and I came back. And so I didn't know any better. I was naive and sufficiently arrogant to be able to say, look, I think I can solve this shit. And so that's how I got into this business. But I also believe, secondly, that like in our country, like especially if you're running a startup in particular spaces, courage is a distribution channel, and it's also in short supply. To tackle some problems, you need to have courage, and that is not something that's tested when you're speaking with people. When people don't face it, they don't realize what you need and what it takes. So dealing with governments is something that we do. Dealing with people that most people wouldn't want to be associated with is something we don't want to do. But do I think that's something that we will face? Absolutely. How many founders want to sign up for this? How many investors have the courage to back something like this and understand? So I think it's not a function of PropTech that's wrong as a sector. I think it's a problem of the participants that think they know this, but don't know any better.
Frankly put, what is your take on this?
I mean, he's pretty much answered most of the points. I think from a VC standpoint, what has happened is erstwhile all the other investments haven't really performed to how other sectors have performed. Vis-a-vis as a proper comparison is one of the reasons why completely agree that they treat it like a stepchild investment rather than anything else. So it's literally the last priority. Very large problem worth solving. Let's say the building we're sitting in today, they really thought that managed office is a problem worth solving way before pandemic happened, right? Everyone started doing it, and after pandemic, you see, I mean, today they're already the ones getting more or less 5 out of 10 RFPs. They're the ones winning it right now in the whole managed space. So it's also about, rightly put it up, it's the guys who are solving other problems are young guys, whereas real estate people, like when we were there, starting business, like, hey, you don't have white hair. How do you buy real estate? How can you sell me real estate? I'm like, no, that's not the problem. I am smart enough for you to get the right asset at the right price. It doesn't matter whether I have white hair or not. That was a similar problem I used to face when I was a lawyer before, right? So people don't care about competency, but they care about white hair that gives them comfort, right? So that is one perspective we're changing, but like I said, courage is one another thing which is there because it's really a large problem solving, and there are a lot of other different bodies involved in this sector, unfortunately, because of how large the sector is, because of which not everyone has that kind of courage, but more importantly, persistence to continue doing that every now and then, right? So unlike the West, where PropTech is really a large sector and there are multiple unicorns doing it, is because the system is well evolved, much better for one to come and take off and solve a problem. Right? So I think fundamentally the problem is, he brought up a point, 2/3 of all the cases are judicial, in civil courts are land related. When you know this is such a large problem, why is the government not really working on solving it? Like I hear few governments solving for the, hey, we're thinking of implementing blockchain or multiple things and trying to digitize the whole land records. I think it's a great start. We are already 10 years late. We have the tech infrastructure. We have all the techies in the world for us to solve. How we solve for UPI by, I think it's a $1 trillion company in itself. I think if we solve for lands in India as to start with as basic, our courts will be empty and might not have the kind of cases which they have right now.
So in last 2 years, we have seen the difference in raising funds, but yet we saw the setback what happened to broker network. So this is like far-fetched thing. How do you think PropTech industry would be now in terms of the next 10 years? It's very, as I said, far-fetched. But what do you think now the shift will be? Because we've seen what has happened with broker network. Would that put a setback to PropTech raising fund, or it's, as you said, there are few companies who raise funds, there are few companies who do not, get funds. But will this kind of news have any kind of a bad impact to the sector?
I would say no. To be very honest, if you see, let's say the company you're talking about, they had only one investor. In the company, they didn't have external investors, and that investor pretty much owned 60-70% of the company in itself. Right? So it was more like, hey, I'm starting a new portfolio, which is going to be my own subsidiary.
But as Ashish said, investors bet on more on pedigree also. So it was a pedigree one, right?
Yes, absolutely. But like I said, you need to bring in external investments also, right? If you're going to take 50-60% of the company, the pedigree is taken aside because now it's strategic investment.
Yeah.
If some strategic investor owns 60%, any venture capital, like the shots are going to be called at the end of the day by the parent company, and this is a subsidiary, right? Whereas it's a portfolio investment and not a subsidiary. Right? So that is one wrong strategy, if I have to put it up that way. Yes, pedigree of the founder, everything goes the same. But I definitely don't see it hampering any kind of PropTech investment growth. Prima facie for two reasons. I think we are right now going through a massive urbanization. We have not seen urbanization like how China has seen that urbanization. We are going to see that continue. While people talk about China plus one, even if we do become plus one and not China again, there's still so much urbanization which needs to happen for people to come to cities. And I think there's a huge shift from agricultural to industrial economy, as you see, right? So PropTech will definitely solve for that. Has to solve for it. Otherwise, we cannot achieve the scale or the speed we need to achieve in a short period.
True. So Ashish, what's your take on this?
Yeah, so I think the broker network thing which you brought up, I don't think it's going to affect investment sentiment in PropTech because it's nothing to do with PropTech, right? It is absolutely, it's something to do with strategy. It's something to do with the way you built your business or didn't build it, right? We don't know. We don't know the inside story, so we can't really comment. But having said that, a lot of these other sectors also, EdTech, right?
Yeah.
How many such cases are happening, right? Every second day you're seeing people getting fired, companies shutting down, VCs writing down their investments. So I don't think such an issue will damage the sentiment of PropTech investments in India. What is a bigger problem is when you hear news of buildings being demolished, right? Yeah. Illegal constructions, violations, areas being flooded. Now that affects real estate as a sector. The moment real estate as a sector is affected, investor sentiments are also affected, right? Which trickles down into PropTech and into the VCs coming into that space and stuff like that. So I wouldn't really say the broker network issue is a big black mark on investing in PropTech industry at all. I don't think so.
Sanjay, what's your take?
Yeah, first of all, I didn't know that company existed until recently. Right? I'm too busy building my own shit. But second thing is that I think India is naturally seen in the context of VCs as capital scarce society, and VCs probably look at, and just general enterprise in India look at labor as very commoditized. But from what I've seen, when I've seen the best of the best, including my previous profession and things like that, there's always been a lot more capital available than there are exceptional founders. If they don't know how to judge that, that's on them. That's why you don't have a Facebook. That's why you don't have anything exceptional here, right? That you say and you look at it and you say, God damn, that's great. And you know how else that translates into, as Sudarshan was saying, about founders, a lot of founders, I don't know how many of them, even that are unicorn or close to going public, have double-digit percentage in their own company. I can tell you, I don't want to be a fucking glorified employee in my own company that I started and worked 100 hours a week for, right? I didn't do it for you. I did it for myself first because I wanted to solve a problem for myself, right? That just shows you that it's not value. For instance, we heard VC sometimes say, we don't want to pay YC valuations. you think talent that's the best in the world will come to you because you want to pay them by the local maximum? If I consider myself to be the global best, why would I take anything less? Right? And so you end up owning 2% of your company. Like Rahul, after I found out, right? Like even in housing.com or things like that, he literally gave away some of his shareholdings at the end.
Yeah.
Why would some founder do that? Right? Because it was meaningless percentage. I would like to believe. For me, when people say like, "Hey, Greg, you raised a large round" or shit like that, then I said that just means I sold more of my company. It doesn't mean like I value the equity in my company. I value it when I give it to people. And sometimes people don't, like, especially at the employee stage here, don't value it because India hasn't seen great exits and therefore hasn't seen a lot of employee wealth creation through ESOPs, right? And that's a problem. But coming down to the point, like even if you look at the cap table and things like that, I don't think there's a lot of respect because people assume that there's this imbalance between the number of founders that want funding and number of investors that are there. Honestly, now coming back to our own personal point, we could have raised another 3.5 million, 3 to 4 million than what we raised. I don't even want to raise that much capital because this is something I often repeat inside my company, which is we raise to build, we don't build to raise, right? And so I have no idea what I'm going to do with the money that we raised. I can tell you at least $5 million is going into some type of fixed deposit. Like my burn's not going to change. Nothing's going to change. The only reason we ended up, raising the amount of money we did was basically because I didn't know how the next 2 years were going to look like. They were attractive terms. Investors, they wanted to put money in, right? And we still turned down a lot more money than, and then like, so I think we don't have any problem raising capital, but I also don't think it's a sector-specific problem. I'm sure what Rahul was building was great, but you also have to question whether investor taking up 60%, 70% of a company because the opportunity is there is well worth it. You have to look at how Sachin Bansal was, treated from Flipkart after owning minority percentage. But the question that I would actually posit is how many founders today in India own double-digit percentage if they're coming close to going public, or they're Series D, Series E, and Series F? And what are we spending that money for? Like the question that we also ask ourselves, like we focus a lot on users. I rarely ever focus on what an investor wants, and like we often like tell ourselves, like when we think about users, it's not how much you charge them, it's why you charge them. It's not how much you raise, it's why you raised. That matters a lot more. So when VCs can't figure that out, and when founder doesn't know, especially when in our current environment, they look at raising as an achievement. Of all the things I want to brag about, the money that I raised is the worst thing that I have to talk about, and the one that gets the most buzz, and it kills me. And because that's not the example you want to set for your own people. Like money can be the problem, but money can't solve